Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to What Do You Say Anime. I am your host, Peter, and on today's episode, along with co hosts Pat and Miles, we are going to be discussing a book called The Seven Basic Plots by Christopher Booker. It is a book that outlines seven different archetypes that stories fall into, and we are going to be using anime for our examples of those archetype plots. Pat was the one who brought this up, and I thought it'd be a great discussion. And before I pass over to Pat, if you are interested in maybe hearing us talk about a certain discussion plot, let us know in like our Discord or DM me, and we can maybe do an episode about it. So, Pat, take it away.
So like Pete said, the book is one more time. It's called The Seven Basic Plots and Why We Tell Stories. I read this in one of my college writing classes that I had to take as a liberal arts major. It was part of the curriculum of whatever class I took. Can't remember what it was. Uh, I will admit I did not read the full thing, so please don't read the full thing. It's 750 pages of academic text. However, I highly recommend you look this book up and just read a synopsis about it, or like maybe what Miles did, which was listen to a few parts of the audiobook where he really Christopher Booker really dives into the thesis of this book, where um, like Pete said, it's about the seven basic plot points and how every single story of fiction told can fit and be defined by these seven plot points, or fit within one of these seven basic plots. So the seven basic plots that we're going to be going over, I'll read through them all and give a quick little synopsis of them, or and then give some literary examples as well, some actual literary examples rather than anime. And then we're going to discuss them all. We're going to talk about a couple of each. Maybe we'll see if we have some overlap. Maybe we'll see if we have some disagreements about where stories fall in. Because like maybe Pete thinks Konosuba is a tragedy, and I have to tell him that it's just not, and that it's a comedy. Obviously, um, who knows? But yeah, so the first plot is overcoming the monster, which some of these are very simple, so that we won't have to go too deep into it. But yeah, basically, the protagonist sets out and defeats an antagonistic force, often which is often evil, and whether or not it's threatening their homeland, threatening their livelihood, whatever. It can be any sort of thing like that. So, a good example of this might be Beowulf, where he literally kills a monster or slays a monster. Um, Star Wars is considered an example of overcoming the monster in the case of the Sith. Um, but yeah, so that's the first basic plot. The second one is called Rags to Riches, where the protagonist acquires a wealth of some kind or power, anything. Could be a spouse as well. There's a couple different ways to define this. They then have to either lose it and gain it all back, or experience some sort of conflict with this power or with this wealth, whatever, and then grow as a person as a result of this. So, good example of this might be Cinderella is a really good example. She becomes rich, or she gets to experience a taste of being rich and being at a ball, and then loses it and has to gain it back. Uh, Great Expectations is another good example. Although, God, if you've read that and you're listening to an anime podcast, I don't know what's wrong with you.
Okay, honestly, that is the dullest book I've ever read in my
Yeah, it's
entire life.
terrible.
Nothing happens. He does nothing, and that's like the point of the book, but why write the damn book?
Yeah.
Anyways, sorry.
Yeah,
I,
it's
I
awful.
hate Great Expectations.
Yeah, so if you can tell, Miles and I are the literary, I guess, backgrounds. So
And I can't
there you go.
read.
No, he can't read. That's why he reads manga.
I like pictures.
He doesn't read light novels though. So there you go, because he can't read. So to continue, the third basic plot point is the quest. So the protagonist and their companions, if they have them, set out to acquire either an important object or get to a certain location. And they'll face obstacles along the way. So you know, uh, the Iliad of Greek times is one of the best examples of this, along with Lord of the Rings, Indiana Jones. A lot of the stories follow the quest. So those are some examples of it. Voyage and Return is the fourth plot point, where the protagonist goes to a strange land, and after overcoming the threats it poses or any sort of thing like that, they learn important lessons at that location. They then return to their homeland with that experience. So, to go back to the Greek examples, the Odyssey is an example of Voyage and Return. Uh, Alice in Wonderland is Voyage and Return. Uh, Gone with the Wind, The Lion King. Uh, Again, there's a lot of great examples of Voyage and Return. Comedy is where light and humorous characters usually have a happy and cheery ending. There can be some drama involved, which but the big thing about comedy, at least when I was researching this part of the book, is that it is not necessarily just supposed to be comedic or funny. It is also supposed to be about how there's usually a pattern to where the conflict becomes more and more overwhelming or more and more apparent in the story, and then from there uh it all resolves. It will resolve, and it does resolve in a happier ending, but it is still but the conflict is still there, I guess. So that's maybe that this will be probably one of the ones that we have a lot of different answers on, I think. So some examples that he provides are The Big Lebowski, The Wasps, A Midsummer Night's Dream from Shakespeare is provided as well. So yeah, so that's comedy. The next one, which I think will be our best discussion, is tragedy, which is defined as the protagonist has a major character flaw or a great mistake that ultimately is their undoing or their fate. Uh, and then if their story pans out, invokes pity or makes you feel bad for them or makes you realize that they, even though they are a good character, have fallen. So the big thing here to note is that it's not just stories that have tragic things that happen in them or whatever you want to say. It has to be stories where a character has a fatal flaw or a tragic uh, occurrence that happens to them because of their own mistake or because of their own um, doing, I guess. So again, we'll get into that discussion, I'm sure. But so some examples are Julius Caesar, Romeo and Juliet, The Great Gatsby. Who are you saying, Miles? There's a good one. Breaking Bad. That's another great example of a tragedy. And then finally, the last plot point is Rebirth, which is where an event forces the main character to change and often become a better person by the end of the story. So Pride and Prejudice is one of the good examples. Beauty and the Beast, Christmas Carol, um, It's a Wonderful Life. I think you could say as well is a good rebirth story. So yeah, those are the 7 basic plot points that we're going to talk about. So I asked Pete and Miles to come with 2 to 3 examples of each plot point, so that we could each pitch it out there, say what we think about it, and then bounce off of each other like we always do. So. Miles, since I always kick it to you first, why don't you kick us off with overcoming the monster?
We should do a spoiler warning as well because
Oh yeah, that's very true. So big spoiler warning for every show.
A lot of anime.
For a lot of anime, I will say, you know what? I'll put it on Pete. Pete's gonna give you timestamps of the shows.
I will be.
Oh, perfect. So there we go. All right. I didn't want to like handcuff him, but he's gonna do it now, anyways.
Well, I'll be doing timestamps for the plots.
The plots. Okay.
You should maybe in parentheses list which anime
I can
are
do that.
discussed.
I can do that. Yeah.
That would be good too. But yeah, so spoilers for that going ahead, and also keep in mind that we might not agree on all these things. So it should be very interesting, I think, to go back and forth and see if we're on the same page or where we end up. So yeah, Miles, why don't you kick us off with overcoming the monster being our
Sure.
first one.
So do you want me to do all 3 of my examples?
Why don't we go one at a time? I think.
Sure. So I started with a nice and easy one. I did Shiki.
Mm-hmm.
In Shiki, there's a bunch of vampires and they're invading a town, and the people of the town have to get rid of the vampires. And at the end, they mostly get rid of all of the vampires, and they save their town, so that they've overcome the quite literal monster.
Yes.
So I like this one because like it's almost kind of anything, since it's like also metaphorical monsters, and that's just like any kind of conflict. It's great.
I can see that. I think that this is a good example of overcoming the monster. I think you could potentially argue it's a tragedy, kind of.
Yeah. I think that there's certainly some tragic elements to it. I don't think our protagonist has like a huge flaw that ends up hurting him at the end.
No, he really doesn't do well. I think it depends on who you define as the protagonist, then too, because like
there's like three of them. Yeah. So
like the main guy, the kid, kind of doesn't have any flaws or personality to him, right? Like he kind of just exists to move the plot along or to have someone to follow for the first part of the story. Versus then the doctor, he has the flaw of maybe like seeing this as sacrifice for the greater good or whatever you want to say, right? Like or trying to pursue the knowledge to guarantee, just he's doing everything he can to save the many by sacrificing a few, which of course does end up biting him in the ass a little bit at the end. And then there's the priest as well, I suppose, who kind of takes over for the third act. If you want to go ahead.
Yeah, like I think that like from all of their perspectives, they view themselves as not like, I don't think any of them. I think they all got what they wanted. At the end of the day, and especially the priest and the doctor have conflicting viewpoints. So perhaps they view each other as tragic, but I don't necessarily know if they view themselves as tragic. And I don't know, we have different perspectives on the characters. So
for sure,
we
definitely do.
We do. So like, I definitely think there's some tragedy in there, but I think it's important to like realize that like there's a lot of overlap in these storylines. Like it's not just one or the other. You can dabble in a few,
Absolutely.
Feeling a little spicy on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, why not add a second or a third even? It's Rebirth because they're vampires, right? Like, literally, yeah. Oh, good one. Pat.
It's a comedy because they're hilarious.
and because their hair is a joke. So there you go.
It's like the most anime hair of all time.
It is easily the most anime hair of all time. Just look up Shiki and you'll see exactly what we mean. You'll see what was her name? Megumin? God, why is that what her name was? The first girl.
Megumi, yeah, the pink hair one.
Oh my God, why do I remember that? Good lord,
she probably has
that's her hair. That's her hair.
She probably has the most normal hair out of the crew.
That's what's stuck.
And it's crazy.
Yeah,
that's everything. But yeah, so that's Shiki. I think that's a very good one to start us off. Pete, what have you got for overcoming the monster?
Yeah, I thought overcoming the monster was probably the easiest one because I think that most like shonen fall into this category. I do think that there are some others that could be put in other places, which I did a little bit and spoiler down the road. But the first one that came to my head was Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. And I think there's like two specific instances against Führer Bradley and then against Father, where the conflict is just killed the bad guy and then maybe save the day. And I do think there are some other underlapsing like plots in the story, but I think the majority of the story is when you killed Father, the story was over. And that's kind of like how I viewed it as overcoming the monster.
Yeah, I can't speak much about Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I haven't watched it, but I
Yikes.
Well, hey man, I don't want to. It's okay, and that's okay. Enough shaming for that. But I can agree that I think that from my understanding, overcoming the monster fits this really well, where they overcome the obstacles that they face, and they at the end of the day they win. Like that's. Which it sounds really dumbed down, but that's kind of what you can do with. That's kind of the purpose of these things, is to dumb it down the plots and make them fit within the definition.
I don't know if dumbing down the
Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood in a later category, so we can compare and contrast. Pete,
sounds good, because I was also considering putting it in another spot. I just think when you see like the top 10 anime fights of all time, like usually Ed versus Father is somewhere in there, or at least as like an honorable mention. So that was the first thing that came to my head.
Fair, yeah. Another good thing to note too is we can also, or at least when we were assigning these categories, I don't know what these guys answered, but I did point out that it can be bad examples or stories that we think did this type of plot poorly. So not all of these have to be like, oh, I think it did Overcoming the Monster extremely well. It can also be a little bit of mix. I know I have at least a little bit of a mix in there sometimes. But yeah, so my first Overcoming the Monster that I put, I got a little creative with it, I think, and I put Your Name. Uh, so, being one of my favorite movies I've ever seen, I think that they are overcoming the monster of the monster, so to speak, which is the odds that are stacked against them of saving the town, or more importantly, say like saving people from the natural disaster that occurs in the movie. And I don't know. I think that this movie best fits into this category because they don't suddenly get rich. They don't. It's a bit of a comedy, but it does have like some serious uh, elements and things that they need to overcome. It doesn't really feel much like a quest or anything either. So
Interesting.
that's why I threw it in here because I
So
think
would
that,
you
go ahead.
say that like the separation between them is the monster that they're trying to overcome? Like that's like the monster.
Yeah, because like otherwise they can't meet in real life, right? Because it was of course
Exactly.
is
Yeah.
revealed that oh, she's from the past, by the way, or whatever, or he's from the future, I guess, depending on perspective. But like, yeah, so without overcoming this monster, they would not have been able to meet, and they would not have been able to reach the promised land of saving thousands of lives and eventually living in flooded Tokyo together, as they
I
do.
like that. I think that's unique. I think it probably fits like comedy the best, as you had mentioned that was a
Yeah,
possible thing. But I like, it's a very good example of like the multi-dimensionalness of all of this, how there are multiple aspects in all of this, and it's like it doesn't like not fit. You know what I mean? Like it.
mhm.
I think I like that as an example because I don't think it's one where like I picked something where they fight monsters.
Yeah.
So like, it's like
I did that too. Don't worry, I did do
okay,
that. But I thought it would be fun to throw this one in there. And I do think that it's definitely top two of like the plots. It's like that, and you again comedy. Comedy does tend to absorb all of like romance and drama, like melodrama shows. It really does tend to, uh, at least when you define it in the way that this guy did. But so I figured I'd mix it up. But yeah, so what do you have as your second one?
sure. My second one was Afro Samurai. I thought this was a good one. It was it's a very simple revenge plot, and Afro it sort of has one goal the entire time, and is to avenge his father by defeating justice. And at the end, he has to make sacrifices and stuff. And depending on your view of it, of like what's important in life, maybe there's like a little bit of tragedy in there, but like the ultimate goal is to defeat justice, and he's able to make the sacrifices and overcome the challenges that he needed to in order to do it. And at the end of the day, he is victorious. And he, in a little twist, sort of becomes the monster for someone else, which is sort of fun. So that's why I picked that one.
I think that's a great example. I definitely, when I was looking at my Mal list, I was like, oh yeah, that'd be a good one, but I didn't like that show, so, so I didn't bring it up.
I
Yeah,
have shows I don't like in here. So
yeah, so do I. Oh yeah, I have shows Pete doesn't like in here too. So
I also
I
have
have-
shows Pete doesn't
I
like.
have shows that you guys like and I hate, so
Yeah,
it's
there we
it's a
go.
perfect mix.
Perfect. All right, Pete, why don't you give us your second one?
Okay, so this one is what you guys played sports, and so I was hoping you can relate to this. That you have this one rival where it doesn't matter like how maybe it does matter, but like if you beat that one team that you hate, like the season was worth it type of thing. Where like if the Sox like sweep the Yankees but they don't make the playoffs, you still sweep the Yankees type of thing.
It's a W.
Yes. So
I guess, I mean, Boston sports, we don't look at things that way, but maybe like a pathetic place like Minnesota,
Yeah.
maybe that's how you look at sports.
Like
Yeah.
if you guys were to say, make the playoffs or like draft someone first overall who wasn't a bust.
whoa, Anthony Edwards is great.
Who?
Come on, man. Oh, you don't watch
I obviously
basketball.
don't.
Okay, but it's sports related. It's season 3 of Haikyuu, Kira Torizawa versus Karasuno, where they set up Shiro Torizawa as this they are the Goliath of the prefecture. That in order to get to nationals, we have to beat them. We set up like 35 episodes of their ace being this just unstoppable monster, this team just being so tall and just overcoming that and then beating them, and then them being just so happy to make it to nationals. Maybe I got the feeling where like they didn't even care how they did in nationals. Like they beat Shiro Torizawa, and to me like that was like they won. Like everything else is just like extra. And I it's my favorite arc in anime history. I love it so much, and that was my second example of overcoming the monster.
I like that. That's interesting. Yeah. I can definitely relate. Like there are times where it's like, all right, yeah, if we beat our crosstown rival, then at least we did that or whatever. Or they were the monster in this situation. So yeah, I can definitely see that. That's a good example. All right. My second example of overcoming the monster is a little bit more literal, to go along with the theme. I did Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. So I had this as overcoming the
I was
monster
thinking about the one
specifically.
too.
Um,
It's like the second half is like where I kind of like moved away from it because I wasn't sure how to view, because it's essentially like two different shows.
it is to some extent, but they're still overcoming a
Oh,
monster. That's the thing. Like,
absolutely.
so that's why in my notes I wrote they overcame multiple antagonists throughout the show. Basically every single and some people might argue, oh, rags to riches or the quest maybe, but I think that they overcome getting out of the oppressiveness of their underground world,
Literally
right?
living in caves. Yeah.
Yeah, literally like that. Then they overcome the Spiral King. Then they realize, holy shit, he isn't the biggest evil, or he was doing this for a reason. And then they
He might not
overcome
even be an
that reason.
antagonist. That's the
No,
beauty
he's
of it.
not. Yeah, so like he's their antagonist at the time, but yeah, it's at the end of the day he was trying to. I think he still is an antagonist because he was oppressing so many
I think
people,
he is
but
too. Yeah.
like he's that morally gray antagonist, I guess, if you will, where like he's doing it for a good cause, he's just doing it very poorly and immorally. So yeah, I think Gurren Lagann is a great example of, and the reason I put it is because it's shonen, but it's good shonen, unlike most shonen. So there you go, that's why I wanted to throw it in there.
Zing.
Yeah, yeah, zing, aha, yeah, duh, we just all hate shonen here, right? Yeah, wink wink. um
I just named a shonen in my last example.
I know, that's kind of my point, is that, oh wait, no, we do watch shonen. Oh, no way. It's not that bad. All right, Miles, what have you got for your third example?
Yeah, sure. So for my third one, I picked Neon Genesis Evangelion. Um,
I almost
eh,
put that one. I almost did, but I knew someone else would.
so I would say especially for the first like 20 episodes of the anime, the conflict is between the Eva pilots and the Angels, and how they are trying to save Tokyo 3 from destruction. And so, I think it's very, there's a threat. The Angels, they come down, people get in Evas and fight them to varying success, but they usually save the day. Um, and so that's sort of that aspect of it. There's obviously a little bit more to Ava, but I think that overcoming the monster bit is pretty present in it. So
I agree. So yeah, that one was one of the ones that I was like, oh, it's a tragedy, like, and then I was like, well, I don't actually know yet because I haven't done End of Evangelion, so I decided not throw it in there. But then I was also like, it's literally monster of the week almost, with the
yeah,
angels, for a good portion of the show. And then of course the monster of feeling the pressure from society, pressure from his father, and pressure from himself, whatever you want to say, like mental health issues. They're all monsters that he has to overcome. So I think that's a really good answer. Yeah, Pete. Then
But yeah.
what have you got?
Yeah, my last one, I just keep it really simple. I just did Demon Slayer, just like a basic revenge story. Demons killed his family. He wants to kill demons, has to go kill vampire Michael Jackson. Plot's not as deep as it's not that deep, but it's just like kill the bad guy and the world is saved. So I use Demon Slayer.
I like that example. It's a fun one. All right, yeah, and so my final one is High School of the Dead, where it's killing zombies, but it's more of the overall threat of the zombies that they have to like overcome. They have to survive in the post-apocalyptic Japan. And I don't know, I just love this show, and I thought it would be fun to talk about a little bit more. Um, and it's a little double entendre because it's like the threat of the zombies and the threat of a collapsed society being the monster, but then also they're actually monsters, like they are zombies. So yeah, I guess that wraps up all of our overcoming the monsters. So why don't we move on to our next one? Rags to riches. So why don't you start us off, Miles?
Sure. My first Rag to Riches is a show we all hold equally dear, and that is Violet Evergarden.
Just say it.
Oh, interesting.
And so I know because I had to come up with some of these last minute because work has been hectic that Pete also has Violet as a Rags to Riches.
I do.
But you have a girl named Violet, and she starts off sort of poor, alone, without any people to like care for her. She gets picked up on a boat. She like integrates herself into society in a various different ways. But she has, I think, several setbacks. The Major's death is one. The reigniting of the war is one. And after each of those, she's able to build herself back up stronger. By getting a job and learning about love in the first instance, and then like learning to like live a life of peace and live for herself and not be like the killing machine that she was like, built to be, like, I guess figuratively, on the second one. So that was like my take on that.
And for the sake of time and everything, I pretty much agree with Miles. I also have it as Rags to Riches, especially with the conclusion of the movie and how that wraps up everything. I think it's just a good example of that whole scenario of,
First time we see her chronologically, she's in literal rags. So
yes.
Yes. So I obviously, one of my favorite shows too. I had Violet on the list, but I disagree with this placement actually. I have it in a later category, so we can talk about it then. That's very interesting though. That you both had it here. All right. What have you got, Pete, for your first? Oh, well, you just said Rags to Riches.
Violet,
You also have
yeah.
Violet. So I guess I'll go next then to get another one in. For me, I had Tokyo Godfathers as one of our Rags to Riches stories.
Great one.
Yeah, thank you. So the reason why I throw
my
it in
top
there,
5, so great one.
yeah, exactly. And the reason I have it is because they not only are they in rags, they're poor, they're whatever you want to say, but then they also experience they get rich in not only monetary amounts, like they find money, they get wealth, but then they also get rich in family and like other emotions or support, whatever you want to say. To get really cheesy and like romantic with it, you know what I mean? Like, so that's why I put them in there because I think it fits. I think they
I agree.
they go from being emotionally drained to emotionally like full and rich. So
That's sort of my thought on Violet as well. She starts off poor in her ability to like understand people. She learns how to empathize better, but there are setbacks. But at
mhm.
the end, she's able to overcome the new challenges and like become a complete person, which she really wasn't at the start of it.
Yeah. Uh,
Um,
I can't wait to change your mind later on.
sure.
Yeah, because I agree. That was my thought process for a while too, and then I thought about it more, and I was like, oh, maybe.
I mean, my actual thought process is Violet never learns anything, but I'm going off of what I view as intended. So
I think she learned something, but yeah. All right, but why don't you go with your second one then, you jerk?
Sorry.
Your second Rag to Riches.
My second Rags to Riches is a show that we actually all do very much like, and I'm going with Zombieland Saga.
That's my second one!
I know another one that I have on the list, but I completely disagree with.
I was like, there's no way he's gonna say Zombieland Saga.
Yeah, so my second one is Zombieland Saga. These girls are all they're at a low point. They are actually dead. They don't feel like their life has meaning. They are able to, despite the slight downside of being an actual corpse, find fulfillment in their life through oh my god, what's their group game for
Fran Shushu.
Fran Shushu. I was calling it Fran Shu. Fran Shushu. But then there are setbacks that make them question themselves and their worth and what they're doing again. Like with the whole beginning plot of season 2, when they like sell like 7 tickets out of like a multi-100,000 person stadium. This is interesting because season 2 could be like defeating the monster, kind of, with like trying to like with that stadium and stuff. If you wanted to do that, but and they're able to like overcome that and like find like self-worth and value through the their teammates and themselves and all of that. So that's why I picked that there.
That's interesting. Yeah. See, again, I have them later on in because I do think that this is where I would put them if I were to not put them in the category that I put it in. But you might have sold me on it. Actually, I might have to change my answer.
Things could be both. Don't worry.
Yeah, they're not supposed to be according to this guy, but they are.
This guy put Lord of the Rings in all 7, so it's okay.
That's very true. You kind of did. Well, Lord of the Rings is a pretty.
It's like 3 huge books. Yes, there's a lot going on.
It's pretty epic. So yeah, there you go. I think you could also put the Odyssey and Iliad in a lot as well, or like the Epic of Gilgamesh. You could put it in so many of them too.
Yeah.
Almost like they're also really long pieces of media. Anyway, so Pete, you got your second one.
Well,
sorry, Pete.
Well, Miles is obviously here just to steal my screen time, but for a few of these examples, I tried to get a little bit more creative and not just taking the literal term for like when they say wealth. I think a lot of people think of like money, but like maybe there's other forms of wealth. So I tried to be creative, and then in Rags to Riches, it's like loses it all and then gains it back.
Yep.
I was like thinking of like literally like losing life and then getting it back and then finding your wealth in yourself and stuff like that. So I thought Zombieland Saga was like, I could see it being in like other categories, but like I thought it was like a fun interpretation of Rags to Riches.
I could see like Rebirth. I could see comedy even. Like there's a lot of Quest. Like there's a lot of stuff you could get in there.
Yeah, I think Rags to Riches, Quest, and Voyage and Return often overlap a lot. In some, you can try to make them overlap at least. I definitely think that that's a fair way to put it.
I just asked that Miles doesn't steal my third one so I can talk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, what's your third one? We'll find out soon.
I don't think you've seen this show, so I think we're good.
All right, good. So my second one, I put Cowboy Bebop because they are rags to riches, both as not only is it a common gag in the show, like it's a joke that they're poor or that they're always trying to get rich and then they get money and then they get then the debtor comes and then they're poor again. But it actually is like the theme that I think follows Spike, Jet, and Faye, with Spike being rich, like Pete was saying, in a non-monetary term. He had a wife, or he had the woman he loved, and he had like a full life. And then he got taken away from him. Same thing with Jet. Had a career, had a meaning to his life, and then now he's searching for it on the Bebop. And then Faye had family, had all these different and actual monetary wealth before then the accident that had her. What was it? She got frozen or something cryogenically, and then healed or something like 70 years later, where none of her family still exists. She knows no one, like that kind of thing. So I thought that this was a good example of rags to riches, with it being like not a literal rags to riches. Although again, it is literal rags to riches that happens throughout the show, where it's played off as a gag, but I think it fits along with their themes.
Well, as a true anime fan, of course I know what you're talking about, since I have seen Cowboy Bebop. So yes, I agree with that statement, Pat.
Yes, of course. I have you seen it, Miles?
I have not.
Oh my god, my co-hosts.
I'm sorry. Well, okay, my bit is I don't watch anime. I have an excuse.
True. Yeah. You have time for Great Expectations, but you don't have time
my father made me read it.
I know. I'm sure it's something like that.
I didn't even have to read it for school. My dad was like, read this. And then I found out years later that he just did it as a joke. He's never read it. He thought it was hilarious to make me read Great Expectations. And it's kind of funny in retrospect.
Miles' life is truly a tragedy.
It's tough.
It's quite funny. There you go. Miles, what's your third show? And Pete's third show, obviously, as well.
Sure, yeah. So my third show is O Maidens in Your Savage Season.
You've seen that show?
No, dude, I just said that to try to guess your third one.
Oh, okay. I was like, wait,
no,
you've seen that show?
Yeah, I was surprised too. I was like, no way has he watched that.
It's a great show.
Yeah, I actually, it's like, I mean, it's not like high enough on the to watch list that it's happening anytime soon, but it's high enough that it'll eventually happen.
All right.
My third one is Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Dude, that was
so. So, I approached this in the way of like Shinji's character, and you know, I guess none of us actually ended up doing like actual monetary wealth, or at least we haven't yet. I guess you kind of did with Tokyo Godfathers, but the actual wealth comes like very split secondy at the end.
Yeah.
But so Shinji starts off, you know, very little self-worth, doesn't know what he's doing. Over the course of the series, he builds up this self-confidence, though it's not necessarily well earned or well fortified. So this is, in the book, the author talks quite a bit about how, like in like Aladdin, you get the thing you want, but it's not always like the way that you were supposed to gain it. And that comes back to set the setback. So Shinji needs self-worth, but he looks for approval in other people by the way that he pilots the Ava to gain this. So he gains it through being, I guess, you know, the best Ava pilot of the bunch. He does a great job. His father at various points seems to like show some worth to him. He tries to get value from that, from Masato, through Asuka, through different relationships he has. Through a series of tragedies in the show, because boy are there many, that all comes crushing down. He loses pretty much all of his confidence, but at the end, I guess I won't get too into detail because end of Evangelion, I don't want to spoil too much of that for Pat. But
thank you.
You know, some stuff happens, and Shinji is able to make the hard decisions he needs to, and gain that self-confidence and self-worth the hard way. And for himself and not through other people. So he like corrects the source of it, and he's able to reestablish himself in a position where he has gained the thing that he was trying to. You know, he's rich now in like self-worth. So that was my take on that.
I like it.
I do too. Pete, so that wasn't your third.
That was not my third one, and
All right, let's hear it then.
My
Go ahead and speak.
My third one is like essentially like literally losing everything. I went with Dr. Stone. You get frozen in time for like 100,000 years just to wake up and essentially start from scratch and become like this master scientist in the world and overcome like the different things that happen throughout the story. I just thought it was like a literal like definition of like literally losing everything and acquiring as much as you like physically can back, because he's limited as being a human with no technology. Even though as the story continues, he gets more and more of it, but he can't like use the internet because it doesn't exist, stuff like that. So I thought it's a really fun story of like literally starting from zero and going and trying to get as close to the top as you can.
I like that. That's a really good example. And yeah, like just sitting here now, I can't really think of anything else that would fit that well into. Like, I guess Quest a little bit.
Quest, because he technically wants to go to the moon.
Yeah, and then also
you could probably
like,
do overcoming the monster.
Of like of like not only
there's bad guys. Yeah,
like the Earth, the primitive Earth is the
monster too, right? Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good one, Pete. I like that. Yeah, so my final rags to riches, I guess we all didn't do literal wealth that much. Yeah, you're right. I did Darling in the Franxx because I feel like and most specifically, you know, there's that story in the show where it talks about the red giant and the blue giant and how like the two of them were friends or whatever, and then the red giant is like, oh, I want to be friends with humans, but they don't trust me or they don't like me. So what the blue giant does is he's like, oh, I can help you out, don't worry. And he goes and like pretends to scare or terrorize the humans, and then the red giant comes along and like scares them off or whatever. which and by the way, this is an old Japanese
Yeah,
like
that's told in something else. Is that
it
also
is.
told in Shinsekai Yori? Is that the show?
I'm pretty sure it is in Shinsekai. I can't remember which
Okay.
one it's in, but it might be. It
It
is told in
is
the other
Shinsekai
anime.
Yori.
It's told very often in anime because it's an old Japanese like proverb or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so and of course the blue giant like runs away and the red giant's like a hero and he has the wealth of friendship and appreciation from the villagers. But then when he goes back home to see where the blue giant is, he's like, where'd he go? And then the blue giant's gone forever, so he loses the blue giant as his friend, his dearest friend, in the process of gaining everything else. Um, so again, that is used as like the main like theme, I guess, of Darling in the Franxx to some extent. I don't know. They attempt to use it as a main theme in Darling in the Franxx. I don't think they do it that well, but it is used, when talking about 02 and oh man, what is the protagonist's name?
His name's literally Hero.
It is Hero. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. So it's the two of them. And so I just thought that was a fun example. Maybe not the best example in terms of like actually doing it well, but I think that they at least attempted it.
I guess just because of like how close Darling in the Franxx and Gurren Lagann is, that I would probably put it more towards overcoming the monster, because like the end goal of Darling in the Franxx, there is like a sight, there's like a light at the end of the tunnel type of thing.
I suppose the reason why I put it here is because rather than like saving the world, I guess what Hero and 02 end up doing is they decide to like help each other or do it for each other rather than do it necessarily to save the world or to overcome the monster. They do it because I
think they do
feel
both.
like they're kindred spirits. Well, it's a bit of both, but like I don't know. I think
yeah. I guess like them doing it for each other therefore saves the world type of thing.
Correct.
So yeah, it's number 2, but like I guess it just happens by proxy. Yeah. But I get it. I get it.
And of course, like the flash shot of the show is like the two of them like reuniting.
Yeah, being reincarnated as like the ending's terrible.
Well, no, I don't think they're reincarnated. I think the idea is that they're kindred spirits, but whatever. That's beside the point. We can talk about Darling in the Franxx another time. But yeah, so let's move on to the quest. Miles, what do you have as your number 1?
Sure. My first one is A Place Further Than the Universe.
Bro, come on.
Wait, do you actually have that one?
Yeah, of course I do.
That's so weird because again, I have it, but I have it in a different category.
So the reason I didn't put it in Voyage and Return, which is another place that I feel like it could fit, is because I felt like the main goal was getting to Antarctica and being able to experience Antarctica to prove to yourself that like you were capable of overcoming this goal, this quest, this obstacle. So like it since the goal was like getting there, and I did read this, so the quest does say like getting to a certain location can be the quest as opposed to like that. That's sort of like why I went with that, because like the stated goal is to get to Antarctica for the main girl whose name I forget.
It's more than just it's 2 girls is like that's their main thing.
Well, like
they have and like so not to get too into your Voyage Return, I think there's definitely a lens you can look at it when you like view it as like her relationship with her mother and like being able to like come back being better situated with that afterwards. So I'll let you go more into that afterwards, but I was approaching it from the angle of her and the other girls perseverance and desire to accomplish a goal, since they all want to go for different reasons and they all have their own goals that they're accomplishing with this trip, and being able to just get there was an achievement, and that's why I went with A Place Further Than the Universe.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So once again, Quest and Voyage and Return definitely do overlap a lot, I think. Yeah, I can definitely get into it later.
I thought pretty hard about where to put that one, and I ultimately decided to do the quest because it gave room for me to do a meme for Voyage and Return. So
yeah. I do have an honorary mention for a couple of categories, so don't feel bad if you on your last one want to throw out like another like quick shout out, like shout out Evangelion for being a comedy,
shout out Dia Justice fitting every single category.
But Pete, so do you have anything to add for?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of bounce off Miles why I put it in the quest instead of Voyage and Return. I think if it was like somebody like only Mari who like went to Antarctica and came back, then I think I would put it in Voyage and Return. But considering that we had like 4 main characters, all setting out for different reasons, I felt like the destination was the important part, and not like, even though it's like the experience they learn along the way was like a theme. I think it was just like more of like coming together and getting to the destination is what mattered the most in that story, and everything in between was kind of like what built it up. But I think if it was just like one character, I think I would have done Voyager Return. But since we had 4 main characters for 4 different reasons, I went with the quest.
That's interesting because of the 4 main characters and 4 different reasons, that's why I put it in Voyage and Return. So that's interesting that we um completely disagree. There you go. Fuck you, Pete.
All right, sweet.
But we'll get into that later. So for my quest, I had Violet Evergarden and the main reason I put Violet in quest rather than Rags to Riches, uh, is because the reason Violet goes on these voyages and goes on these adventures and tries to find all these different things is not just to try to find the major. The quest, the goal that she is set out with, that is clearly defined in the show as well, or it's stated in the show, is she wants to find out what love means or what love is. So that's why I labeled it as the quest, because it is her trying to answer this one question or find this one like treasure, so to speak, of what is love, what does it mean, yada yada. So and I especially think with the ending with the movie, I personally think that she finds out what that answer is, and that's that's why I think it is the quest. But again, I definitely can agree Rags to Riches fits very well with Violet.
I really like the quest there. I think that's great. I think
I
part of
changed
the
your mind. There we go.
reason that I think mine fits. I think yours does fit better, to be perfectly honest. I think part of the reason I didn't like Violet Evergarden, it didn't resonate with me as much, is because I took the quest, like I sort of thought the actual quest, the real love along the way was like accepting loss and like understanding, like I thought that was like a necessary part to her quest, and I just like don't feel like that happened. And so like that might be why I didn't like initially think that for Violet, just because like the way that I engaged with it was like slightly different than the way, you and Pete engaged with it, for example.
For sure.
But like you saying that, really does. I think that's the best fit for it.
Oh, thank you.
And my next one up is like very similar to what Pat said, but like in a different sense. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Awesome. Well, hopefully Miles
is probably going to steal it. Let's go.
I'm not going to steal it. You already used this one, Pete. My second one is Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood.
All right.
So, I think that the quest aspect of this one is, to me, like the main thesis of it, they're trying to get their bodies back. That's what they're doing the entire time. And, there are different challenges they face. There are different monsters they have to beat in order to get this quest done. Lots of sacrifices they have to make. But at the end of the day, what they're trying to do, and I think specifically Ed is most trying to do, is get his body back, get his brother's body back, so that they can, live normal lives, and ultimately they're able to accomplish that. So, that was my take on that. Pete, I know you're a big fan. What are your thoughts?
I agree that I think Full Metal is one of those like Neon Genesises where like you can throw it into like 6 or 7 of these, and I think it makes sense.
It's massive, right? And there's like 7 different arcs, and like individual arcs can have these because they're like open and shut stories sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Yep, I have no qualms with that take.
I think it makes sense too from my limited knowledge about the show. Pete, what's your second one? So what's your big one?
Yeah, so it's like it's like the idea of like Violet, like what Pat was saying, was like searching for something more, or like the idea of love. This one was like searching for the idea of like forgiveness and um, but also like literally finding that person. And I did a silent voice where the redemption of Shoya and him trying to make up for the wrongs that he did and like have that forgiveness and lose that guilt that he has for being such a terrible person as a younger person. But the quest was to find Shoko, and he did, and then just like what became of that, as well as like kind of finding something at like finding I don't know, like a treasure at the end of the trail or something like that, or something along those lines, where it's like the quest was to do this, but like they faced like a bunch of different obstacles through like rejection, like not wanting to see that person, but then in the end, like getting the acceptance, removing that guilt, having a friend. Just like I think that just like resonated with me with the quest and his journey throughout the entire movie.
I think that's fair. I think you could throw it in Rags and Riches and maybe Rebirth even as well. With if you're looking at specifically from the MC's point of view. But yeah, I definitely think the quest fits very well too, where he's looking
I
for that
I think Rebirth
redemption.
does because I do think you see in the movie there is like a specific scene where everything changes for Shoya, and I think Rebirth would also be like another spot I would throw it into.
Hmm. Cool. All right. So my second one, I'll be quick with this one because I think it's pretty simple. I have Golden Kamui, which is a show that I love and adore. It's about it's almost like a heist set in sort of ancient and not ancient, set in like 1900s Japan, back when the Russo-Japanese War was going on. Put it very simply, they're searching for treasure. They're dealing with problems along the way, other temptations, other things going on, and so yeah, they're going for a hidden treasure. And I don't know, it's like One Piece, but I actually like it. Is the best way to describe Golden Kamuy. I feel like almost, like they're endlessly searching, and they're on to their fourth season soon, so I can't wait for that. But yeah, so what have you got for your third one, Miles?
Sure, I'll be pretty quick with it. My third one is Neon Genesis Evangelion, and um, not sure if you're picking up a theme here yet, Pat.
I maybe,
The cheat code that is Neon Genesis.
So I took this specifically from Gendo's perspective, right? So Gendo has a quest to unite or reunite with his wife Yui, um, and he does like a whole lot of things in order to get this done, including preserving her soul in a giant human mech, and you know, turning the entire world into Tang. In order to try to achieve this goal. And he does achieve it for a period of time before it is thwarted by his useless child that he probably should have loved a little bit more. Um, Lots of characters in the show have quests. Shinji has a quest to learn why he wants to pilot the Ava. Asuka has a quest to like try to impress her father and stuff. There's stuff in there. But I went with Gendo's because I talk about the other characters later.
Hmm.
Nice,
I wonder
nice.
when. I wonder when. Yeah. All right. All right, Pete. What have you got for your third one?
My last one is I think it's just really cut and simple, like literally going on a quest of finding something. I did Made in Abyss. It's Rico is looking
Yep.
for her mom in the abyss and almost dies like 7 times. I wouldn't put it in Voyage and Return yet because they haven't returned from the abyss yet. So I think once the story is complete, then maybe it could fall into that category. But for right now, the main focus is Rico trying to find her mom and just being cool with Reg and
Yeah,
Nanachi.
it's a quest right now, but we'll find out if it'll be a voyage and return or a tragedy.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll
It
find out. Wink,
could
wink.
be a tragedy.
She could just get stuck down there, and then there you go. That's what it is. I mean, I don't know how you could write it where it isn't. What happens? I guess I don't know. Again,
We'll find
Oh,
out.
an elevator. Who knew this was here the entire time?
yeah,
The end.
yeah. Yeah, that's how it works in Made in Abyss too, where they can just take elevators without consequence. There's not any specific scene that I can think of where, a certain someone
Yeah,
melty,
not at all. Yeah, yeah. Just use
suffers
elevators.
from.
Nothing bad happens in that show.
Hmm. Oh, what a show. Yeah. So mine is a very serious one, a very deep meaning one as well. For quest number 3, late back camp.
Ooh, I was
Laid-back camp.
okay. I was legit thinking about this, but I also kind of want to low key put it in rags to riches because they're just broke high school kids.
Yeah, so their goal, they are on a quest to go camping and to do club activities
And they do.
and to just enjoy nature and Mount Fujisan. And do they do that? Yes, they do. They achieve their quest. So that is the best way to put it. I thought that one fit extremely well because it's super simple and fun, and I love laid back camp. So yeah, there you go. All right, let's move on to Voyage and Return. We're almost halfway there, boys. We're trucking away. I like this. So yeah, Voyage and Return, Miles. What have you got for number one?
Sure. My first one is Sword Art Online. Specifically the first season. Um, Kirito takes what he thinks is going to be quite the short voyage. Maybe initially into
Yeah, of course.
the game, and it ends up being a longer one. But along the way, he learns some valuable things about himself and others, and also several thousand people die. But when he returns, he's a different person, right? He's changed.
Mm-hmm.
He's learned, to be a little more caring and stuff. So I think that, he learned something on his trip. He's able to open up a little bit. You can see in subsequent seasons, he does need to work through some of the trauma that happens, but he does get there. And that's its own thing. I think there's a whole Voyage and Return you could talk about in Gun Gale, about his trip and learning to get past PTSD and everything like that. Sword Art Online, of course, is the finest work of art, and no one can say otherwise. And
So
I think it belongs here.
I agree. I couldn't find a way to put it into my seven. Actually, I didn't really know how to, so I'm glad you did. I definitely agree, though, that Voyage and Return makes a lot of sense. I think you could argue Rebirth as well, with him almost literally being reborn as a new person into the real world after going through everything they did multiple times in different worlds or in like the digital worlds, whatever you want to say. But I like Voyage and Return a lot. That's a really good way to put it. Pete, what have you got?
So for my first one, when I thought of Voyage and Return, my mind went straight to Isekai, and I went to the absolute masterpiece that is Sword Art Online. And I mean, honestly, I was just literally just trying to think of an isekai where they legit come back. And
Yeah,
God
there's not a
damn
lot
it,
of
Pete.
those.
I was
Not a lot of those. Yeah.
yeah, I was I think in anime, the only one I could really think of is Sword Art. So I went with Sword Art. I wanted to do Grimgar, but I don't know what happens in Grimgar after season 1. So I'm not like what Miles said. They learn things while they're in this world, come back, real life stuff happens. I'm not the biggest SAO guy, so I don't have a whole lot to say. But I just thought SAO fit the bill pretty spot on in terms of anime.
This is borderline impressive, Pete.
Great minds
Yeah.
think alike, maybe.
Yeah, they do. Speaking of great minds thinking unalike, I think a place further than the universe. A place further than the universe is A Voyage and Return. Specifically because I think that the quest for some of them, or for most of them, wasn't just to get to Antarctica. And I think that, so like Pete was saying earlier, because there's 4 of them, that's with different things. That's why it's the quest to get to the spot. For me, it was the exact opposite logic, where they have 4 different goals. One of them wants to it wants to just commit to something and do it. The other wants to prove to herself that she's capable of doing things. The other has to do it because of or wants to make friends, right? That's what the influencer girl wants to do, is make real friends. And then the last one obviously wants to go there to find out what happened to her mother for good and get closure. So I think that all 4 of those, and then obviously return from Antarctica and then get back to their lives or live their lives. So that's why I looked at it as a voyage and return rather than just a quest.
I can absolutely see that.
Yeah, that was my logic behind it, at least. But I again, quest and voyage and return are very similar.
Yeah, it's sort of so very similar.
Yeah.
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 I mean, I'm not quite at Voyage and Return in the book yet, so I'm interested to see how he differentiates it. But isn't the Odyssey like just like the quest part of the return part of the Iliad?
Yes.
Sort of. Sort of.
Yeah, there's more. I'm not, yeah, that's like kind of like that though, right? Like,
A little bit.
Because he's already out and about when the Iliad starts, and then he has to come back to help because like everyone's trying to bang his wife, and also there are some other issues with like
A couple other issues, you know.
Yeah, I think there's like a Cyclops or something. I don't know. That might be whatever. The point. I'm not great at
you're doing your best, and I appreciate that.
But yeah, like, so I'm interested to see how that gets like differentiated. I feel like A Voyage in Return just features so many quests in it, like most of the time, that it's interesting to. I'm excited to get like a academic's take on how these differentiate.
Yeah, like for me, I think the main thing for me is like they return and they have changed as a person. Because like, you could argue for quests. So like Violet, let's say, she's questing to find what love means, but she doesn't. It's not necessarily about love, finding out what love means, and then her changing. It's more about her just objectively.
I think it's like a square rectangle thing. Like in my head, Voyage and Return is like usually quests, but not all quests are a voyage and a return.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I'm a chemist. I took like 2 years of English classes in college.
And I can't read.
And Pete can't even read.
Yeah. He's doing really well so far for someone who can't read.
It's been quite impressive.
I got great ears. What can I say?
He just plagiarized from Miles. There you go. So what's your second one, Miles? Speaking of you.
So I'm stretching the return one on this, but this is one of our favorite anime as a podcast.
Blood Blockade Battlefront. Let's go.
So I've picked Twilight.
Ah, yeah. Love that anime.
So Bella gets brought into like this very strange world of vampires, and from her like normal mundane life in Forks, Washington, and there's actually not anything else you can have in Forks, Washington. It's quite boring, but there are then like she delves into this world of vampires and werewolves and stuff, and at the end, even though she's still part of the vampire world, the hostilities and stuff of that ecosystem have calmed down a bit. And she's able to live a peaceful life with her emotionally abusive husband, Edward Cullen, so that they can be codependent together. And so that was my take. Similarly, for an anime, I also thought about Rosario to Vampire, where our protagonist is brought into a strange land filled with monsters, and through that he is able to learn to stand up for himself, to be more outgoing and brave, and he does occasionally go back home, and you can see his parents see a difference in him. And so that was my thought there. We're going with two vampire-related anime, Twilight and Rosario to Vampire.
Very nice.
Duo.
Well done. Pete, what have you got?
So the first sentence of Voyage Return is the protagonist goes to a strange land. But what if the strange land came to the protagonist? And that's what I was doing, a little twist on this Voyage Return. I'm going with Fruits Basket, and it's Toru discovering that the Zodiac characters are actually like real, and her coming to terms that supernatural things exist, along with her like problems and just dealing with her like losing her mother, being homeless, that type of stuff, while also the whole cast of Fruits Basket having their own insecurities, their own problems with like being inferior with their family and serving like one specific purpose. Like, you're the cat, you have to do this, and just like overcoming that. And it's just like their voyage together, and then just at the end, like the return where they break the curse. Toru is able to find happiness again after losing her mom. Just like finding love within the world, I guess, stuff like that. So I thought Fruits Basket would be like a fun fun twist to Voyage and Return.
That is a good twist. I like that. That is fun. I think it fits too because it is a bit of a they go on an emotional voyage to try and like like you said overcome the difficulties that they overcome the monster. Fuck.
Yeah, like each Zodiac member has like their own like problems and temptations, and it's just like them as like because all the Zodiacs are linked together, so like they're all in it together, sort of trying to break the curse, and then Toru's sort of just like the captain of the ship.
Right. I like that. So captain of the Iliad almost, you know. All right. All right, so my second one, I had Irizuku: The World in Colors, which is a show from like 3 or 4 years ago, where there's a girl in like 2070 Japan where magic is like normal or whatever you want to say. Like it's a regular thing that you can just buy from a store. You can buy like a bottle of magic or stardust, whatever you want to call it. And basically she can't see color. She's like colorblind, whatever. No, or she loses the ability to see color, and she voyages back to the past to spend time with her grandmother, who was an adolescent at that time, learning to be like a witch or learning to be a magician, whatever you want to call it. And basically she goes back in time, still can't see color, but then she slowly learns. She meets someone who becomes the light of her life, and he helps her see things clearly again before she then returns to the present and lives out her life in current time. And you know, I thought that was a good one for Voyage and Return, partly because she does go back and then come back to her own time, but then also she does grow as a person. She experiences like a complete emotional change and outlook on life. And then she also still does return to him. You know, like one of the last shots of the show is her visiting, you can only assume the guy's grave because, you know, it's 70 years. So the guy, you know, the 18-year-old that she met is probably dead at that point or whatever. You know, like it's implied that he passed away, and she returns as a different person to the future, which is again, I thought that was a fun one.
I was wondering when you're get your witch show in.
Oh, I'll get there. Don't worry. It's not. What were they called? Witches in the show? I can't.
I never saw it.
This, right? Oh, you didn't watch this one? Oh, so this was before you were a really big seasonal guy.
No, it was. I just didn't.
Oh, you didn't watch it?
I heard mixed things about it, so I didn't watch it.
It was all right. I think you would like it, but it was very niche.
Sounds
like Miles
sad.
Would hate it. It is. It's not that sad. I don't think it's that sad. It's like a happy, sad.
All right.
But yeah. So Miles, what have you got for your third one?
Sure. For my third one, I have Neon Genesis Evangelion.
No.
Wow! Holy shit! Are you kidding? What a shocker!
So, this one, I looked at Shinji's voyage into like the nerve ecosystem. So at the beginning, he's brought into this land that he really doesn't know anything about. It's an underground base. He's then forced to fight in robots and stuff. And by the end of all of it, at the end of the show, at the end of the movie, this stuff is gone. So like he is out of this, and he is able to live a normal life. He completes his voyage and saves the world by getting rid of instrumentality. And we'll talk more about instrumentality later.
But wait, there's more.
Really? Oh man, no way! More Evangelion. Oh, Pete, what have you got for your third one? Miles is cheating, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it's Miles being Miles. Who knows?
Yeah, it is.
This was fun. I thought it was fun to think of, like...
It is fun. It is funny.
Kind of in the same realm of Fruits Basket, but it's where the strange land is unknown to those who are involved in the story. I went with The Promised Neverland. You have this world where they're orphans and they think they're going to be adopted, but it turns out they're just like there to be consumed for food for these monsters. And then you see like Emma, Ray, and Norman and the whole gang escape, and they go to the world. They learn skills through, you know, monsters who don't agree with the practices. They find like weapons that they're able to fight back with, and then they return back to like save all of the other orphanages. So to me, that was like a pretty cut pace of Voyage Return.
Yeah, and then they returned to the maybe not.
And then season
I'll
3, we
spoil it.
returned with a slideshow of season 3.
Yeah, and they returned to the real world through the real human world, because apparently that still exists in there. Whatever. God, that is a bad ending. Not as bad as everybody said.
Yeah, it's like,
bad.
wait, what did you
It's
give
bad.
it? What was your rating?
Well, I still gave it like a 7, I think.
I think you
or
gave
a
it an
6.
8.
No
To my
way.
anime list, we go.
Let's look.
Well, I'll look, and then you do your third.
No way did I give it. I'm pretty sure I gave it a 7, but even then, that was a really high score for it compared to other people. All right, yeah, I'll do my third. My third's really simple, easy peasy. Here is where I get into my witch, Wandering Witch, Journey of Elena. I wanted to talk about it.
There it is.
There it is. Well, it starts with the young girl, Elena, who wants to be a witch. She wants to do all these things because she's been reading a book called The Journey of Nike, which was about all these different adventures and places that that Nike had gone to in her life and then written a book about. She has to then learn how to be a witch. Her parents are very like hesitant and like want to make sure she wants to do it before she commits to traveling and doing all these things. And yeah, she travels and learns on her journey about all these different places in the world, about all these different towns and people along the way. Of course, it's revealed that it was her mother that was Nike all along. That or was the person that the book is based off of. But yeah, so that's the journey, the voyage that she goes on, and then she returns home with all of her different knowledge and uh, again experiences, I guess, as a different person. Because she starts out kind of bratty, kind of snobby, thinks very highly of herself, and then she gets welcomed to the real world very quickly and learns to temper that. Never completely though, which is what I think is fun about it. But yeah, so let's move on to comedy now.
You gave it an 8, by the way.
No way.
You did.
Yeah, I posted it in the chat.
I still don't think it's as bad as everyone else gave it. But maybe I really don't. That has always been my stance, because like as objectively without being a source reader, I thought it was pretty okay or pretty good. Maybe not okay, pretty good. That was my initial reaction to watching it.
That's all good, baby.
Yeah, no, it's okay to like things, I guess. No, it's not.
Nope.
All right, let's do comedy. Speaking of things we like, comedy. Miles, what have you got?
Sure. My first comedy is the quintessential quintuplets. So, I guess I'm like cheating a bit because I read the entire manga, so I know that
It doesn't have to just be anime. It doesn't.
A horrible, tragic ending at the end. But
I can't believe they all die. It's crazy.
Yeah,
he gets with his sister. It's so tragic. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, it's the inverse of four weddings and a funeral. It's 4 funerals and a wedding. One of them has to kill the other 4 to be.
I love it.
But so it's a series of like some dramatic events. There's like things to overcome. About like figuring yourself out, and like Futaro has to think about who he wants to be with and what all the different girls mean to him. But I picked this one specifically because it like harkens a bit to like a Shakespearean comedy where it ends with a wedding. Yeah. So like it fits this, but then it's also got your like Midsummer Night Dream sort of deal where you end with a wedding. Because that's how I believe all of Shakespeare's comedies ended. So that's why I went with this. I mean, most of the romantic comedy sort of things are going to fit here because you generally get happy endings, and there's like confusion, but it all gets sorted out at the end, and everyone's happy. So.
Yep. Yeah. So Pete, what have you got for comedy? Number 1.
I'm gonna see if I can steal one of Miles's maybe, and it's a movie that he recently forced me into watching, and that's The Night Is Short, Walk On Girl. And it's just like a great telling of a college girl getting drunk and just doing wild shenanigans throughout the night, and just whatever comes of the story, whatever happens in the day, whatever happens in the night, she just goes along with it. There's like an underlying romance with the senpai where they kind of have, he has like this theory of running into her on like accident in quotations, but 100% on purpose to have this like red string of fate that they're meant to be together because they always run into each other, even though he's like doing it on purpose and trying to get that in her head. And her just living out, having a great night out, having fun with her friends, having fun with the random shenanigans that she has, just being like drunk and being in college. It was just like a great fun show. It was a little over the top, but in the end, really light-hearted, really fun comedy, and you get the conclusion to the romance and the date at the end of the movie. So that was my number one pick.
That's fun. To go along with what everyone else has done so far, I kind of just took, for the first one at least, I took my favorite romance, my favorite romance that I thought fit the definition of comedy in this definition. That was Golden Time, because I think that not only is it comedic in nature, and obviously it's a romance show. It's about these two college students falling in love, but it also does have a lot of confusion and dramatic events that happen near the end of the show that have to do with the character having amnesia, having a second personality, or and an internal conflict over whether he is making the right decision by dating this girl, the girl that he chooses over whatever else. But then at the end of the day, they triumph over the circumstances and they're together, and like doesn't end with a literal wedding, but it essentially implies that it ends with a wedding. So that's what I liked about Golden Time, and I think that it fits comedy very well. So what have you got for number 2, Miles?
He did not steal one of mine.
Damn, shucks.
Yeah, sorry. I, for number 2, went with Angel Beats. And so I picked this one for a few reasons. One, because I thought it would be a good example to like highlight why like tragic backstory doesn't equal like tragedy.
Yeah.
And that you can still have like sadness and stuff in like a comedy when using the phrase this way. So, in Angel Beats, there's a series of characters. They're in the afterlife and they're trying to, I guess like fight against what they need to do to like move on and be fulfilled, but they end up being able to work together and, overcome the challenges that are needed to like have happy endings for everyone, and everyone at the end is able to like move on from the afterlife being a fulfilled person and happy with the experience they had. The whole point of the place they go is to bring joy to children who died too early, who had tough lives, right? So you get that sort of like single clarifying happy event at the end when they graduate. And though it's like sad, it's one of those like happy sad things, right? They're sad because they need to leave this place, but much like graduating or anything like that, it's a joyous event overall. And so I picked it because I thought it did a good job of contrasting maybe like the normal view that we think of when we like the popular term of comedy and how our author uses the term comedy. That being said, that show kind of sucked.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a great example, though.
It is. I think the way you put it is great. I like that. I guess I have one to go along with that later. Pete, what have you got for number 2?
My number 2, when I was looking at like the definition of comedy, it was like having like this central idea and overcoming it as well while being kind of like lighthearted. And I went with a movie that came out this year called Josie the Tiger and the Fish, which is about a paralyzed girl and coming to terms with her disability while at the same time finding feelings for somebody for the first time, and her acceptance of it's like hard because like she's gonna have like difficulties throughout her entire life being paralyzed and not wanting this person that she's attracted to have to like go through that, but also coming to terms with that's what she wants, and him also like realizing the difficulties through that. But it is mostly like a lighthearted comedy, and I think that they have a great like dynamic and them coming together and realizing like, hey, whatever challenges like happens through life, like we'll do it together. And I thought that was like a really good example of like the comedy while also like having fun with each other and having fun through the adversities that they share. So that's what I went with.
I like that. I think that that makes sense. Again, like we're finding out, a lot of rom-coms fit into this category
Yeah.
super well, right? Um, yeah. So number two for me, I put Zombieland Saga as a number two here for me because um, I think the reason I put it in here, although you guys did a really good job talking about it in, I believe it was Rags to Riches, was I put it in here because I viewed it as them that no matter what adversity they faced, they still were going to overcome it together, and they were gonna um they have moments of confusion and conflict, but at the end of the day, it always does get sorted out. They always do come to some resolution, and it's also a comedy at the end of the day. It's a making fun of idols. It's making jokes about idol culture. It's having fun characters that are fun and having their interactions played for jokes and played for bits. So that's why I put it in comedy. Although again, I think I definitely can see now that it might fit better in Rags to Riches. But yeah, Miles, what's your third comedy? And well, I guess I don't need to ask you, but so why is Neon Genesis Evangelion a comedy?
So you know, y- I couldn't fit Neon Genesis Evangelion into comedy, unfortunately.
Really?
It's not
Oh,
very lighthearted. So I went with
Wait, so you're
the
telling me it doesn't?
rebuilds of Evangelion for this. And so, you know, as we all are aware, um, the rebuilds of Evangelion are, of course, a reconstruction of Neon Genesis Evangelion. They are showing a more hopeful uh, way to do this. There's more triumph. Our characters are able to succeed. Um, so wherein Neon Genesis Evangelion characters failed and lost to their flaws, our characters are able to overcome them in this. I know that 1 or 3.0 plus 1.0 just came out, so I'm not gonna get too into it, but at the end we have this like singular moment of clarity, we have a resolution to the issue, and we have a happily ever after sort of moment. Um, while the story isn't free from any setbacks, it is mostly a story of being able to overcome trauma and not be controlled by it. And there is a continuation of that throughout all of these as they re-examine these characters in a more positive light. Um, and then the ED is an absolute banger. So
yeah.
that is why I picked the rebuilds of Evangelion for my comedy.
Nice.
You had me there. I was like, oh wow, he couldn't. No way did he just give up and not do it. But you had me for a split second. Pete, what's your third one?
It has in the first half, not gonna lie. The last one, I did not want to do a rom com, but I thought it was like three girls who all have like these silly problems trying to do a very simple task. I went with Keep Your Hands Off Aizoken. It's the problems are like their parents, the school, and getting money just to make an animated short or whatever for their school. Really lighthearted, just like a good time. You could maybe put this in like a quest or Voyage and Return because they are set out to like do this, but I think it mostly just falls under like this lighthearted. The goal is simple. The problems are not super serious, and overall they're just having like a good time being together and creating what they love.
Yeah, I think that that's a good way to put it too. Similarly to Pete, my third one, I think you could also throw in a couple different categories, but I think that happens with comedies, especially where it's hard to just have a story that's comedy because there has to be something, there has to be conflict, and the comedy isn't usually part of the conflict. It's usually some sort of other plot point. So my third one was Sarazan Mai, where it's three guys or three boys that are all dealing with their own issues that they have to overcome, which they do through kappas and pulling things out of people's butts and just a lot of other shenanigans that happen in this show that are quite it's a very fun show. I would this would be a great watch club show, I think.
I agree. I want to check it out. The OP slaps too.
The OP is a banger. So is the ED. Peggies are just on top, as always with that stuff. So yeah, I think it would be. I think both would be very interesting. Or I think it fits comedy extremely well because at the end of the day, it is a comedic show in nature. But yeah, so let's get into the bread and butter. This one's gonna be really
This
fun.
one's
I
gonna be
want to do some
fun.
tragedies. So Miles, um, man, I think I know what one of yours might be for a tragedy. But what's your first one?
Well, I'll start. I think it's the one that I'm most likely to have overlap with Pete on, so I will start with it first. I went with Playlay Magi Madoka Magica.
I did not. That was like my honorable mention.
Okay.
I knew I could not bring up Madoka. So I was like, that's Miles. Go ahead. So go.
So I think that there are specifically two characters we can look at here. I think the most obviously tragic character is the best character in the history of anime, and it's Kyubey. Because he just gets killed so many times, and it's so sad. No. It's Sayaka Miki. So Sayaka is a sort of like gallant to a fault. She is like extremely noble, is unwilling to bend to the harsh world around her in any way. And as we know, those things that do not bend break. So unlike the Pats defense in the red zone, which bends but never breaks, Sayaka lets up a start, just three and out, and all of a sudden there's an 80-yard bomb for a touchdown, and she absolutely loses her fucking mind because she can't deal with like the selfishness and everything in the world and the harsh fights and stuff that she's supposed to deal with, and eventually falls to despair, becoming a witch and having to be killed by her enemy / potential lover, Kyoko. So that was that. Another example that I'm not exactly sure of how, like I think it's tragic, but I'm not. The person does succeed.
What, Madoka? Because they do succeed in Madoka?
Well, Homura at the end of Rebellion, Homura's flaw is that she really likes friendship, like to a concerning amount.
Yeah.
It's so much so that she's willing to um destroy the world for it and to encapsulate her friends into like a sort of, I don't know, like fake environment where they can all be friends together. At the end of Rebellion, it seems like she succeeds. However, she speaks in Madoka doesn't really seem like she's swayed. Like she doesn't know what's going on, but she hasn't changed as a person. So Homura has forced her into a situation, but she hasn't succeeded insofar as changing her friend's mind to value their friendship more than Madoka values like the betterment of the entire world.
Right.
And says that, in the future, I guess we're going to have to like fight again. Madoka doesn't know what that means because her memories are gone. So in some ways, like I guess that could be like Homura's refusal to give up, that her insistence on this is going to create a cycle where she continuously has to fight her friends, and there's tragedy in there. We do have the sequel movie to the sequel movie coming out soon.
All these questions.
So
to ruin Madoka forever if it's bad.
Yes, I can't wait for just an absolute unnecessary sequel movie that will. I have faith. But that's Madoka Magica and why I believe it's a tragedy.
Fair enough. I thought about it, but I was like, well, they kind of succeed in the end, or one like like a little bit, but obviously.
Yeah, I specifically went with Sayaka because like Madoka succeeds, right? Like that's why I'm very on like the main series isn't deconstructive, because like at the end of the day the power of friendship wins, and then in a movie like the power of friendship wins like way too much. So I think like the movie sort of like deconstructs that, but I think looking at Sayaka's story, and she's like a protagonist, so I'm okay doing this. Through the first like 9 episodes or so, is pretty. I mean, she's a tragic hero, right? Like she's very like that. So
yeah,
I'm happy with with that explanation. And it's
No, I
hard
think
to
it's
find
fair.
them in anime, as I think we'll find. So
It's extremely hard to find tragedies in anime, I think. They are very far and few between. Pete, what have you got for your first one?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with probably my most tragic character in just like anything, and it's from my favorite show, manga, anime, whatever of all time. That's Berserk, specifically Griffith. His downfall of him being so overwhelmed by pride that he loses the guts in a duel for his freedom, that he just absolutely snaps, and in response causes the eclipse, and the entire world is engulfed by apostles. So him having this flaw of just having so much pride at being the best at everything and then losing to guts in a one-on-one duel is just like so tragic for just not only him, because he goes into utter despair, he loses himself as a person, he does questionable actions that I think a lot of people would disagree with, all because of his essentially world being shattered by somebody being better than him at one thing. And to me, I just loved how that's like portrayed throughout the entire story. It's essentially was the rest of Berserk, not just the Golden Age, is the cause of Griffith's demise and his tragic nature of being this prideful leader and not coming to terms with everything else in the world other than him being this god, essentially.
Yeah, so again, you're cheating by only having it be one character, but
Well,
yeah, that
there are, but I think that is
I know.
the focal point of Berserk. Is
Yeah,
I mean, literally four-fifths of the story is because Griffith does this, and I think it's like the focal point of Berserk, essentially.
that's fair. I can't speak much to it because I haven't read it yet or watched it that much. I've watched a little bit. But like my understanding of the story, it definitely is it's very tragic, the story itself, and then also it is his fatal flaws, like Griffith's like flaws that he can't admit defeat or can't deal with defeat, and it causes, like you said, most of the things that happen in the show. So yeah, so my first one that I went with was quite I even in my notes I was like, oh, it's a bit of a stretch. But I put Fate Zero.
I was
no,
thinking,
Um,
I
I
completely.
was thinking that
I th-
too, for sure.
I
uh,
threw it out as an option for Pete when he was trying to
He
replace
did.
a show.
mm, so I put Fate Zero because most of the time the characters that die in the show, both servants and masters, they both die from either their pride or their values, such as I don't know, Saber being like a knight, honorable knight. Same thing with the um like the code of battle, whatever you want to call it. Same thing with the spear guy, who isn't Cucullin, but I want to think he's Cucullin. But yeah, so that's those. I thought that they again like it's a lot of it is really just their pride, like you said with Griffith in this case. Like it's not necessarily like many other fatal flaws, but I also think uh you know his name's Kiritsugu, right? The main guy.
Yeah, Kurotsugu and yeah.
His big flaw is his like for the better good or for the you know like and that gets obliterated by the Holy Grail, or the Holy Grail at least tries to obliterate that mentality and show him how flawed it is. And his teacher obviously dies in that like arguably one of the best episodes in anime. Because of that flaw or that mindset. So I think that that's why it's tragic, because at the end of the day, at least in Fate Zero, if you just look at it as an objective story or its own thing, no one really wins in the end.
Nobody wins. Yeah.
No one wins in the end. So that's why I was like able to justify putting it on there, because it fits the tragedy definition so well. Even though a lot of it is also maybe the quest or whatever you want to say, but I thought it fit tragedy very well. But yeah, so Miles, what have you got for number two?
Yeah, so I'm taking what I guess I consider to be the easiest one for anime, and I'm just gonna go with Death Note.
I took it off when I had enough, but I definitely was going to Death Note. Yeah.
Yeah, so Light Yagami has a fatal flaw, and like so many tragic heroes, his fatal flaw is his pride. Um, except everyone except for Brutus, whose fatal flaw is his love for Rome. Um, and so he starts out he gets the death note, and he attempts to make the world a better place, and kill criminals and stuff, but he is murdering people, and he starts sort of changing his view on like who he can kill, and he'll kill people to keep himself safe even if they're innocent, all in order to like impose his view in the world. And so he has a demonstrably good effect on the world. However, at the end of the day, his pride gets him because he is so sure that he didn't make a mistake, that he didn't expect the way that he was caught, basically. He thought he had outsmarted everyone, and he didn't account for someone having ever, one-upped him in any way. He tossed that out of his calculations, and he is killed at the end. So,
yeah, it's super easy there, too, because he dies, so there you go.
Yeah. And his soul gets sent into the void. So, that is, I think, the most, like, traditional tragic hero sort of thing in anime that I could think of, at least.
Yeah, I agree that was definitely one of the more just cut and dry. It fit the definition really well. Pete, what have you got for number 2?
Okay, this one, Miles, you have to come along with me on this journey, and it's one of those ones where I had a hard time picking tragedy. So the protagonist in this instance is society, and I went with Psychopaths, and it's the idea that society believes that this system that they're living in, the Sybil system, is just so perfect, and their world is perfect, and then everything will be solved by the Dominator in case anything goes wrong. And then you see the system fail, and people start to not understand what is happening. It's like they're going through this, like they're just going through life as life tells them to, because they have to keep their like levels at a certain level. They have to be happy or they'll get whatever arrested. And then their system just crumbles, and you see that with like Makishima trying to change the world and society as a whole. Its flaws, that it's just so, it just thinks that there's nothing can go wrong. My life is perfect. And then when things do go wrong, they don't know how to handle it. There's the scene where the lady is being murdered in the street, and the civilians are just watching this lady get killed because they think it's right, because their world is correct. Why would there be something wrong with this situation that's happening? And so I guess that's kind of like the far off tragedy of the society and the world of Psychopaths.
So their tragic flaws, their desire for comfort, as Makishima would say. So did you finish Psychopaths?
No, I haven't. But like I'm like 85% of the way done.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure nothing happens in those last 5 episodes.
No.
Well, okay, but just like even just like the scene of like the girl getting killed in the middle of the street is just like a major flaw to society, thinking everything is perfect. That
I do agree. It shows the flaw of the society, which is the trust in the system. They can't compute something going wrong. They allow these crimes to happen because they are so ingrained in the system, right? Like, they trust it so implicitly that when you can't trust it anymore, it's able to take advantage of them, and that is, I would say, a tragic flaw. So as long as nothing happens in those last 5 episodes, Pete, you're absolutely correct.
I hope so.
Definitely. Especially since Miles likes it so much, there's no way something happens.
Yeah, I definitely hate things with twists and stuff. I've never
with proper endings. Yeah. No. Yeah. So just to keep us moving, because we are approaching almost 2 hours of talking. We're doing really well. We're getting there though. For me, I had for my second tragedy, White Album 2, where I know Pete's gonna laugh, but yeah, it is tragic. These 3 characters, the love triangle that forms between them, none of them want to admit what's going on or their flaws, their mistakes, their emotions to each other, and then it eventually just continues to boil up until eventually it just explodes in the last couple scenes of the show. And then, of course, it happens throughout the extent. The show's only a prequel to or prologue to the entire story of continued mistakes and poor decisions or whatever you want to say in their lives. And yeah, I think it's tragic. Pete thinks it's
If you want
tragic
to
to
hear my
watch.
thoughts on White Album, go look up our Secret Santa episode.
Yeah,
I was pretty drunk and I went on about a 25-minute rant about that show.
yeah, about how much he hated it,
I
which
fucking hate that
broke,
show so much.
broke my heart because I thought it was. I think it's like one of my favorites of that genre, at least. Yeah. So that's White Album 2. Check it out. Can't wait till Miles does eventually. To fix our
Got to
1-to-1
break the
argument.
tie. I'm the rubber.
Exactly. But yeah. So Miles, what's your last what is the
Yeah, sure.
tragedy
So
of
my last
Evangelion?
tragedy is, of course, Neon Genesis Evangelion.
Of course.
And so I'm looking specifically at Asuka's character here, and the arc our I guess like tier 2 protagonist goes through. So Asuka is a very prideful woman. She needs to be the best. She meets Shinji, who she does not respect because she thinks he's weak and timid, and she doesn't think those are admirable traits. But Shinji just keeps on being better than her as being a Eva pilot, which makes her doubt herself, which makes her spiral into a horrible, like, self-destructive thing. And at the end of all of it, we find her in a bathtub in a broken down shack, just emaciated, and she's in a coma for like most of the movie. So her own pride and stuff led her to her like ultimate downfall. So that's Asuka and why she's a tragic person.
Fair enough. All right, Pete, what about you?
Mine is in Hunter x Hunter. It's during the Chimera Ant arc, and that is through the eyes of Meruem, who is born the Ant King, and through his entire series, he learns that he is the most powerful person essentially in the world in his eyes. He kills anything he wants. He gets his own kingdom, essentially, and then he finds a person who is better than him at essentially shogi, and he's just absolutely fascinated that somebody is better than him at one thing, kind of the opposite of Griffith. And it's tragic because then he learns like what humanity is, that he's not who he thinks he is. Just he was born on a pedestal, so he thinks that he is the best. That's what everybody has told him through his existence. And then him losing in shogi is his like wake up call, and it's tragic because like as he learns this, as he falls in love with this person and finds out like what love is, it's too late. He's dying. He's unable to like undo the wrongings that he did, because I believe at the end that he did feel bad for what he did. It's just that's the environment that he grew up in, and it was too late to find out that there was more out there than just him being this god king, essentially.
Interesting. I can't speak for Hunter x Hunter because I haven't seen it yet, but yeah.
The best show to never made. It's so good.
Cool. So for me, real quick, tragedy. I guess I kind of cheated in this because, well, no, she is a main character. I did Elfin lead, and I think it fits tragedy really well. Where this character in Lucy is put in a very unwinnable situation, and she also then has these just flaws in the way that she perceives the world, and that leads to her eventual demise in the anime. So, yeah, I think that's cheating a little bit because she's not the primary main protagonist, like the guy is. But maybe you could say he's tragic too. I don't know. I don't have the brain power to do that right now, though. My special shout out for tragedy would be Akudama Drive, because it tries to do the thing where each person has a hubris, has their mortal sin or whatever you want to say, that their thing that leads to their death, the main characters or the main cast at least, like Hoodlum and everybody. But yeah, no, still fuck that show's ending. So
Love that show's ending.
It's and the ending isn't tragic, even though it should have been. So there you go. We'll leave it at that. Rebirth, our final category. So let's make this quick because again we're going. So we're doing a lot of good talking, but we are also talking a lot. So be our longest episode ever probably.
Secret Santa is like 2.5 hours.
Oh well.
Also,
yeah,
Pete talked for 2.5 hours about his
top
top
I did.
100.
Yeah, my top 100 was like 2 hours and 45 minutes.
That's true. All right, yeah, but what's your first Rebirth, Miles?
Yeah, here's a really easy one. I picked ReZero. So Subaru gets like reborn in another world, and he is forced to, you know, adapt to it, learn how to be a better person. It changes who he is. He can't be the shut-in otaku anymore, and so he has to adapt into this new situation. ReZero.
Yeah, I did ReZero as well. Don't have much to say else about it. I was just like, yeah, he does really like go through, because he's not. I didn't want to just do isekai, but he actually does go through like a significant rebirth in character. So that's why I
Yep.
thought he was a good fit. Pete, what about you?
I was thinking about doing ReZero, but I did a character I think much better than him, but kind of on like the similar level. I did Hachiman from Origairu.
Okay.
I felt like throughout the entire series that you see like these events where he is like a genuinely like good person, but like through the events he comes through like understanding that it's okay to like want more. It's okay that he doesn't have to be this person that like he thinks he has to be. And I think just through the entire series that we see like this completely, I personally think it's the best character development in anime. Just Hachiman from episode 1 to the ending, just becoming a completely different person for the better.
Yeah. I can definitely agree with that. I thought about putting Origairu on the list too, but then I was like, it's more comedy, because it is a rom com. So there you
Yeah,
go.
I guess I'm like really focusing on Hachiman himself.
Yes, himself specifically for sure fits. Miles, what's your number two?
Sure. Hey Mako, if you're listening, stop listening. I'm about to spoil the fuck out of Higurashi. I'm gonna give you like 20 seconds.
That was 20 seconds.
Okay, that was 20 seconds. Yeah,
Okay,
go.
this is very important. So, the main character of Higurashi is Rika Furude. She, much like Subaru, has the ability to loop back in time after she gets murdered. Um, and there is a moment specifically where she realizes that it's possible for her to change what is happening and that she can get through to people, and that allows her to like get out of this issue. So for the first like 900 years or whatever, as she's looping, she doesn't think that she can like change anything. She thinks the rules of like the life she's leading are set. um but after an event happens, she's able to sort of have faith, learn how to be more proactive, and not just accept the tragedy that has befallen her. But as she is reborn, literally this time, able to actively work towards, um, finding a way out of the problem she's in. So
Nope.
I knew we wouldn't be able to get through an episode without Miles bringing up Hig, but
Hey, you got
this
Witches,
fits.
I got Berserk, Miles has Hig, we all have our thing.
Oh well, no, that's not. Definitely not a knock at all. I was just wondering where they were when they were going to come in.
I was originally going to do the Ava thing with Higurashi, but then I didn't want Mako to have to skip the entire episode.
Yeah,
So,
there you go. I was kind of surprised that we gotten this far without you mentioning that. Yeah, so good for you. Pete, what have you got for your number two?
I'll keep this short and sweet. Have you guys heard of a show called Neon Genesis Evangelion?
No.
Okay, well, there's this great
Not
show.
once.
It's on Netflix. Watch it dubbed. Don't watch the rebuild movies, but yeah, I mean, just short and sweet. It's Neon Genesis. Like a lot of not only Shinji, but I think some of the other characters have like rebuild like aspects throughout the show, and I think it's just like a great example of it.
That's fair. Yeah. Probably don't have to get too nitty gritty with it, as we already have so far.
And I'm sure Miles
for-
will say it's his third choice anyway.
it's their choice too, exactly. Number two for me was Relife. I think that another re in its name, but yeah, Relife I think does the, without being an isekai, it does like the rebirth. The guy gets to go back to high school and try and like redeem himself or become a functioning member of society, which of course we find out later on in the show that he didn't really fuck up. It's not like he's a bum for because of his own fault. He stood up for one of his senpai or yeah, senpai, older persons, and then got fired because of it, like out of spite or whatever. But it does also show that he grows as a person and shows growth of not only him but then other characters in the show as well. So I put that for Rebirth, because he does get reborn as a younger version of himself. But yeah, so Miles, what about Evangelion? Do you give us some more details? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I'm specifically talking about instrumentality in this case. So when oh, you haven't seen End of Ava. Anyway, some things happen. Okay, yeah. So when they all go into the Tang, there are
Love Tang.
the Tang is super good. Shinji is able to see the thoughts of everyone, understand all of their own personal problems, and that's just like shared with everything. Shinji is then able to realize that like life is worth trying and is beautiful, and that's how he's able to like make that final decision at End of Evangelion to end that. Code Geass is sort of like the Code Geass thing, because Code Geass is just exactly in Evangelion. And so that's what happens. So during that whole second half of End of Evangelion, where it feels like you're tripping on mushrooms, that is Shinji going through the whole rebirth moment.
Right.
Very well done.
I did really well not hearing any of that. I'm very proud of myself. Like I like squeezed my headphones together more than normal to make sure I didn't have that spoiled for me. Pete, what's your final one?
My last but not least, I wanted to pick a show where I actually think that Rebirth was the focal point of the entire like main cast. And the event is through running. I went with Run with the Wind. It's just like an incredible story of these college kids through different like athletic abilities, social standards, how cool they are in college and stuff like that, and coming together and really like building each other up, being a cross country team. It's an incredible story of just like brotherhood, camaraderie, and just changing your life through an event where you maybe would have never experienced it if you didn't try something new. And I think Run with the Wind is a great example.
I think that is too. That's actually a really good one. So first I'll do my honorary mention. I threw in Fruits Basket into Rebirth because I felt that it's kind of like a coming of age for every single one of the Zodiacs, and also a rebirth of Toru as a person, pre-mom death and post-mom death, essentially. And yeah, so that's why I put Fruits Basket in there. But my favorite rebirth story, so much so that I thought, like, when I was first doing this, I thought one of the 7 plots wasn't Rebirth, but I thought that it was Path to Redemption. And that is Rurouni Kenshin, my favorite historical shonen, seinen, whatever you want to call it. Basically, Kenshin is formerly an assassin and a manslayer, thought to have killed hundreds, and essentially something tragic happens in his backstory, or in his life, and then he goes on a quest for redemption. He becomes a Rurouni, a person who travels and has a vow not to kill anyone, and it's about his redemption from his past and him coming to terms with his past and growing as a person and becoming the wonderful human that he ends up in as by the end of the story. So that just wanted to flex my manga collection too. Finally have the 28th volume and so many more stacking up back there. But yeah, so that's my final Rebirth. So yeah, guys, we did it. We went fucking 2 hours or so of talking, but I think it was good content.
Very good.
So yeah, if anyone has any comments, any things that they want to say, any shows that you think, like glaring shows that you think we really missed that like truly epitomize these topics, please come talk to us in our Discord about it. We can't wait to discuss things further. I'm sure some of the cast that wasn't here tonight will have their own ideas to throw out there as well. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. And Pete, why don't you just do the last little
if you're listening on like YouTube, leave a comment or something like that and we can respond to you. If you like the podcast, want to support us, like, comment, subscribe, follow whatever platform you're listening on. It's the best way to support us. In the link tree below, you can follow us on our socials and then links to our Discord. If you like our content, next week for Watch Club, we are doing the tale of Princess Kaguya, and then the week following that, we'll be doing our first impressions of the currently airing season. So look forward to that content in the future. If you're in Minnesota, in 2 weeks, I will be at Anime Fusion hosting my first ever panel. Come play Anime Jeopardy. You can win dope-ass prizes like this full Tokyo Ghoul box set of manga. I'm giving away dope prizes, so come check me out there if you're in Minnesota. Otherwise, thank you so much for sticking around and listening, and we'll see you next time.